Imagine living in a world where peace existed on the surface, but just one wrong move could have ended humanity in fire and ash. A war that was never fully fought on battlefields, yet it controlled the lives of billions of people. This was the Cold War, the most dangerous standoff in human history. The Cold War wasn't about tanks charging through borders or armies clashing face to face. Instead, it was a silent, invisible conflict between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. They never declared war on each other, but both sides lived under the shadow of nuclear destruction. The frightening part? For nearly half a century, the entire world was caught in their rivalry. But how did it all begin? To understand this, let's rewind to the final days of World War II. In 1945, the Allies defeated Nazi Germany. Europe lay in ruins, millions were dead, and two countries rose to dominate the world stage. On one side, the United States, the champion of democracy and capitalism. On the other, the Soviet Union, the torchbearer of communism. At first, they had been uneasy partners against Hitler. But once the common enemy was gone, their differences exploded into suspicion and rivalry. The Americans feared the spread of communism, believing it would crush freedom and free markets. The Soviets, meanwhile, saw capitalism as greedy and exploitative, and they wanted to spread communism worldwide. These opposing ideologies were like oil and water they could never mix. And so, a Cold War began. Why cold? Because it wasn't fought directly with guns and bombs, but with propaganda, espionage, economic influence, and the constant threat of nuclear weapons. It was a game of power, played in shadows. One of the earliest flashpoints came in Germany itself. After the war, Germany was split into two. The western half supported democracy, while the east fell under Soviet control. The city of Berlin, though deep inside Soviet territory, was also divided. In 1948, the Soviets tried to cut off West Berlin from supplies, hoping to starve the people into submission. What happened next was astonishing: the Berlin airlift. For almost a year, American and British planes dropped food, coal, and supplies from the sky, keeping the city alive. Imagine thousands of planes flying day and night, feeding a city trapped in the middle of enemy territory. It was a victory without bullets, a symbol of determination. But that was just the beginning. By the 1950s, the world saw the birth of the nuclear arms race. The U had dropped atomic bombs on Japan in 1945, but by 1949, the Soviets had their own nuclear weapon. Soon, both sides built bigger and deadlier bombs, capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. People everywhere lived with one terrifying thought: what if a single mistake ended the world? Children in America practiced duck and cover drills in classrooms. In the Soviet Union, people dug shelters. The idea of mutually assured destruction, that both sides would be annihilated if war broke out, kept the peace, ironically, through fear. At the same time, the Cold War wasn't just about weapons. It was about influence. Both sides competed to win allies across the globe. The U.S. formed NATO, a military alliance of Western countries. The Soviets responded with the Warsaw Pact. The battle stretched into Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Every new nation that gained independence after World War I became a potential prize in this global chessboard. Sometimes the Cold War turned hot. In Korea, the North invaded the South in 1950, and the U.S. and its allies rushed to defend South Korea, while China and the Soviets supported the North. The Korean War ended in a stalemate, with the country divided to this day. Later, in Vietnam, America fought to stop communism from spreading, but after years of bloodshed, it was forced to withdraw. These proxy wars, where the superpowers supported opposite sides, became one of the defining features of the Cold War. And then there was space. In 1957, the Soviets shocked the world by launching Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. Suddenly, A tiny beeping ball orbiting the Earth sent panic across America. If the Soviets could send satellites into space, what else could they launch? This sparked the space race. Schools in the U.S. poured resources into science and technology. Astronauts became national heroes. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. But in 1969, the Americans struck back. Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon, uttering the immortal words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The space race wasn't just about science, it was about prestige, power, and showing the world who was ahead. But perhaps the scariest moment of the Cold War came in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviets secretly placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the United States. When American spy planes discovered them, the world came closer to nuclear war than ever before. For 13 days, humanity held its breath. Would either side launch? Would the missiles fly? Finally, through tense negotiations, the Soviets agreed to withdraw their missiles, and the U.S. secretly agreed to remove some of its own missiles from Turkey. The crisis ended, but the fear never truly went away. Let me ask you something. Can you imagine living in those days, knowing that at any moment, your life could vanish in a flash of light? How would you go to school, to work, or even sleep at night under that constant shadow? The Cold War wasn't just fought in politics or the military, it seeped into culture, sports, movies, even daily life. From James Bond films portraying Soviet villains to Olympic matches that felt like battles of ideology, every arena became part of the conflict. Yet, even in this dark period, small cracks of hope appeared. Leaders signed arms control treaties to reduce nuclear weapons. Exchanges of art, science, and sports showed that ordinary people on both sides wanted peace. But the rivalry endured. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was struggling. Its economy was weak, its people were restless, and its system was crumbling under pressure. Then came Mikhail Gorbachev, who introduced reforms like glasnost, openness, and perestroika. Restructuring, he sought to reduce tensions with the West. Meanwhile, U.S. President Ronald Reagan increased pressure by boosting military spending, but also engaged in historic talks with Gorbachev. And then, something remarkable happened. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, the symbol of division between East and West, fell. People from both sides tore it down with their hands, celebrating freedom. Within 2 years, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the Cold War ended. After decades of fear, suspicion, and rivalry, the world stepped into a new era. But here's the real question. Did the Cold War ever truly end? Even today, echoes of that rivalry remain. The mistrust, the competition for power, the race for influence, they never fully disappeared. The Cold War was not just a chapter of history, it was a warning. It showed us how close humanity can come to destroying itself and how fragile peace really is. So the next time you hear about international tensions, remember this story of a war without battles, where fear kept the world from burning. What do you think about this? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more.